Looking for financial support that strives to honor your community's rich heritage and cultural practices? Introducing RBC Origins. Our Indigenous banking specialists provide resources and advice that can help transform your ideas into tangible progress and community prosperity. At RBC, we're committed to driving your goals forward. Learn more at rbc.com/indigenous. RBC, ideas happen here.
I'm Rick Harp. This is your APTN News Brief for Thursday, August 7th. We start in Ottawa, where the Carney government is set to meet with Métis leaders today, part of his pledge to discuss Bill C-5, the federal legislation fast-tracking resource projects. But as Fraser Needham reports, the meeting may prove more notable for who's opted not to be there.
Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand had some strong words for Prime Minister Mark Carney during a press conference in Ottawa on Wednesday morning.
That relationship, to me, is about him, the Prime Minister, a new Prime Minister of this country, not taking the time to understand who the rights holders are and taking the liberty to respect that. We worked 150-something years to get here. And for somebody to come along and just say, well, it doesn't matter, you come to that room because this is who's going to be there, even though your people say you don't go to that, I am not going to be placed in that position.
At issue is a long-standing battle between the MMF and Métis Nation of Ontario, which the Manitoba Federation does not see as legitimate. It has long accused the MNO of having members who aren't Métis.
It's unfortunate. But
MNO President Margaret Froh maintains the MMF simply doesn't have its facts or history straight.
The Manitoba Métis Federation's position around this argument that they're making, that all Métis come from the Red River, that they are the Métis government that represents them all, is wrong factually. It doesn't line up with the facts of history. It doesn't line up with contemporary history. The reality is that we are here as a Métis government. We are here to work with other Métis governments and with the Prime Minister in the best interests of the country.
This will please rise.
After the government rammed its contentious Bill C-5 economic development legislation through Parliament this spring, the Prime Minister promised consultative meetings on the legislation with Indigenous rights holders. The Métis Nation of Alberta President Andrea Sandmeyer says her organization supports Bill C-5 in principle.
So we are in support of responsible growth, responsible resource development. But the main thing is that we need to be included and not an afterthought. We need to be, our input needs to be in every stage of the implementation of C-5, whether it's, this Indigenous Advisory Council or the Major Projects Office. We need to have a voice.
The MMF and MNO also say they support Bill C-5 in principle. The NDP maintains consultation meetings on Bill C-5 should have been held with Indigenous groups before the legislation had passed, not after.
It's obvious to me that they don't care about Indigenous people's rights. They don't care truly and sincerely about free, prior, and informed consent, and that they are only holding these meetings to check a box to say that they've met with Indigenous leaders.
The Prime Minister's office has been very tight-lipped about releasing information about Thursday's meeting, but in an email early Wednesday afternoon, the PMO confirmed the meeting will be held in Ottawa's downtown core. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
The challenges continue to pile up for York Factory First Nation in Manitoba under a wildfire-related state of emergency as of last week. Now, smoke from those very same fires is so thick, planes have been unable to land. This on top of the fact York Factory's ferry is inoperable due to low water levels. And with over 600 people effectively trapped, Chief and Council wrote Premier Wab Kinew, along with 2 cabinet ministers, asking them to release dammed-up water from the Churchill River diversion and Lake Winnipeg in order that ferry service could resume. They also wrote that the community's water supply is contaminated with silt. They claim releasing the water would address both issues. Leadership has also called for an all-season road. To Fredericton, where cutbacks to Jordan's Principle and fast-tracking resource projects were among the key agenda items at last week's emergency meeting of the Assembly of New Brunswick First Nations, a meeting which included Wolastoqey and Mi'kmaq chiefs and FaceTime with federal and provincial leaders. Terry Richardson leads the Pabineau Mi'kmaq Nation.
We realize with Jordan's Principle, there's a huge backlog right now of cases. And the fact that these cases are backlogged it has to be addressed. So we met with the Premier as well as Minister gov't, and we asked, what is the province and federal's plan to get rid of this backlog under Jordan's principle that we have? The fact that we have kids that are falling through the cracks is unacceptable. Obviously, this was done backwards by Indian Affairs. It was a poorly orchestrated Jordan's principle. They didn't put enough funding in place to put this into place in the first place. So it is an Indian Affairs responsibility to get this back into track and to ensure that our kids are receiving the funding that they need. So I believe on these nation building projects, this is a very trying time across Canada. For First Nations, I believe we can take the lead and show that, we can get Canada as a whole through this, but leave us lead. I support nation building projects, but they can't come at the expense of environmental or the lack of consultation with First Nations. We need that equity stake for First Nations. And as we grow, as these projects come forward and the economic opportunities are there, we should be the first ones to benefit from those opportunities.
And finally, a solar celebration is on the horizon in western Yukon, to be set in Beaver Creek. The official grand opening of the White River First Nations' $24 million Sauce Energy project will take place August 11th. The largest solar project in the territory at 7 hectares, or 10 soccer fields, it's capable of generating 1.9 megawatts of electricity. And not only will that replace 350,000 liters of diesel fuel per year, roughly half of White River's needs, the First Nation will get to sell some of its power back to ATCO Electric. John Vandermeer is president of White River's Development Corporation.
We want to start creating, our own wealth to be less reliant on the federal government. Yeah, this helps us along that way for sure. We signed a 30-year energy buyback from ATCO, and so we're guaranteed income for the next 30 years off of the solar project.
And that's your APTN News Brief for Thursday, August 7th. I'm Rick Harp.